What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Collider Interview Studio at Fantastic Fest 2024. I am sitting with the duo behind Little Bites. Yay! Huge congratulations on your latest.
So much, yeah.
So I am well aware of what Little Bites is, but because we're celebrating it as a festival debut, our audience will need the 101. Spider, I'll give you these duties. Can you synopsize your movie?
What was the log line? I can't remember. I mean, for me, it really was an exercise in horror as an allegory for parenthood. Now, a lot of people have found their own entry point into the movie, but for me, it was really about being a parent and the struggles of protecting a child in this insane world, and how our monster represents all those threats and fears and insecurities, and just displayed in a very strange way.
I will lean into those themes briefly, especially because we're at Fantastic Fest, where all the stories we're experiencing are genre. What is it for both of you about genre storytelling that you think makes it an especially powerful way to explore difficult human truths?
Yeah, I mean, I just talked about this, and it really was I grew up, obsessed with horror and sci-fi and comic books, and historically, I mean, we can talk about, I guess, whatever we want now, but historically, there were taboo subjects that you couldn't represent on screen unless it was represented by a Godzilla or a robot or some. But I always loved that spirit, and I think that's such a great way to tell a story, and also to attract maybe genre fans that maybe wouldn't be interested in hearing something, like we're discussing, but yet wrapped with a monster or a creature. It's just such a great way to tell a story. It's just more fun to do in general, but I always loved that historic element of genre in tackling subject matter that's a little taboo, possibly.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I think, as an actor in a horror film, you get to do all the jobs. You get to do it. You get to be in a drama. You can be in a comedy. You're also being tortured and devastated and having these deep emotional responses. And I feel like I get the same thing as the audience watching a horror film. And a film like this, yes, obviously it comes from the writer from being a parent, but I also think it really tackles, like abuse relationships, and also just, struggles with substance abuse. And I just think that there's just a lot of underlying storytelling in this particular film that I just feel like is important. And I also really like how the main character, she's just always trying to keep herself under control. And I feel like you don't get to see that a lot. You see it in a very, very flawed character who's never wants to show that she's afraid, never wants to show that she's angry, never really gets to be happy and be herself. And I just think that that's sort of a beautiful thing, and especially in the genre space, to watch.
It's such an exciting thing, doing such a deeply internal performance, but also having the challenge of conveying what is going on inside. And I think you do that very, very well here.
Oh, thank you.
I wanted to go back to genre storytelling just briefly before I start digging into the details here, because it's this conversation is kind of making me think of this. Do you have I keep wanting to say horror, but genre is much wider than that, a genre comfort movie, something that is twisted and something that other people out there might not make you think you might feel better if you watch, but you find kind of peace in it, I guess?
Oddly, almost all of it. I think maybe for us as a couple, it was always The Shining. Yeah. We would watch it. We'd fall asleep to it. We'd
wake up every single night for the first month we were dating to the moment when he acts down the door. And
I have so much respect for this.
Yeah. I mean, and it's one of it's when the gun to the head and pick your favorite horror movie. It's I have to go there. It checks all the boxes for me, not only as a horror film, but just as a movie in general. And it's I have so much, of my own influence that I take from all those Kubrick films, and that pacing and that style that he does better than anybody. So yeah, that film for me is probably the one. In Jaws too. Yeah.
Solid picks right there.
I mean, so we come from a different generation. So there's certain things I grew up on that really, a film like The Craft really helped me, because I was a young girl and I was strange. I was a strange girl. I'm from a really small town, and there weren't a lot of kids like me. So when I saw that movie, I'm like, oh, okay. That's going to be my group when I get older, you know? So I really connect to films like that and Scream, but also, you know, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh, yeah.
The way I felt as a little kid seeing that and being absolutely destroyed by it, but then also wanting to watch it again, I didn't know what was happening to me, but that was sort of when I really realized I fell in love with horror movies. Just nothing made me feel that strongly, you know? And so that's sort of really special to me.
That was a beautiful answer. I love that. All the right titles there. All right.
We passed the test.
Very much. Flying Colors.
What would the wrong answer have been, I wonder?
They're truly camp.
Yeah.
I have stopped using the term guilty pleasure movie because I feel like if you love a movie, you shouldn't feel guilty about loving
100%.
it. So I have completely taken that out of my vocabulary. Digging into the evolution of your story idea here, Spider, I'll give this to you. What was idea number one, the thing that started this all? But then can you tell me if you had a break story moment, something that made you think like this screenplay is whole now?
I think that, well, I mean, you know, I obviously the seed of this is parenthood. And, you know, I'm a parent, and my oldest son is 20 and our daughter is 5. So I'm sort of dealing with all aspects of life. And, but not only is it just this idea of protection, but I realized as I was writing it that it really is more about the sort of unrealistic expectation of family, and that we all, you know, I grew up watching the Brady Bunch and Leave It to Beaver, and we all, whatever your version of that, like sort of ideal existence of mom, dad, and dinner around the table, and I sort of realized like no one has that, and no matter how good of a person you are, things happen in your life, and we don't always know what's happening in someone's life, and I think Mindy goes through this experience and running into other moms or her own mother, not having a clue. Sometimes even the people closest to you don't have a clue as to what's happening to you. And so all those things came into play. And these are all real life things that have happened to me that I don't even discuss some of them, you know, because they are too personal. But so I felt like from the beginning, the concept was really there, you know, and it's something that I didn't have to imagine what that feels like because I live it, right? So but I remember the one scene that came late. In my mind, the script was done, but then there's always like a last minute idea. And it was the scene where Agyar sings Mindy this horrible song. And once I had that, I was like, okay, fully developed just how awful this person is, this creature is. And I think that was one of my favorite breakthrough moments from the script. Yeah, it was the song.
Coming back to the creature eventually. But Krsy, first I wanted to come your way with a question about finding your character. Someone described this to me like this in an interview recently, and I've gotten very obsessed with the idea. I'm not sure if this is how you explored her, but the thought that when you jump into a new project, it is nerve-wracking because you're on unstable ground. And then all of a sudden you have this moment either in prep or on set when like you do something and you know you had just found your character. Yeah. Did you have that moment with Mindy, and if so, when?
Yeah, honestly, it was a lot of pressure at the beginning because the first scenes we shot were with the mother. And I'm like, okay, this comes later in the movie, and you can't be, you know, I really had to establish who she was then, and she'd already gone through all this trauma at that point. So I had to be really mindful of where I was going to go from there. But I remember it was the first day really working and doing the scenes with the monster. And really, I think that first scene where I opened the door and I'm speaking into the darkness, and he was in the room and I couldn't see him, but I knew what he looked like, and we'd never rehearsed that scene. And so when it happened, I was terrified. Like, I just remember feeling like that voice coming out of me and just like, and I was like, okay, this is, and then after that, I just never allowed myself to break that feeling until the movie was done. And then it took me a while to become myself again. I'm a really happy person, bubbly person, and I just wasn't after that movie. But then the when he sang to me, because it was like holding back, and we talk about like this performance, it's a lot of just trying to internalize and be strong in front of, especially in front of the monster, because you don't want to show vulnerability or weakness. You'll get yourself killed. So I feel like that was the moment I couldn't control it anymore. It was just like she's like, I'm dying, and you're saying these horrible things and singing to me about my dead husband and how I'm all alone and I have nothing. And I couldn't stop crying. And I remember we only did one take of my coverage because I was like, and I just like, snot. And this fire's like, no. I'm like, are you sure? He's like, you're not going to do that again. And we just let it feel the way it felt in the room. And so I was like, okay, I understand who this woman is. I understand, like, this is how far she's going to go emotionally because that's as far as she's going to let it go. But then I'm going to peel it back. And that was really like, yeah, I think the turning point.
It is something else, that particular moment. I'll just lean into your monster pretty heavily at this point. Krsy, I'll give you my first question, just in terms of working with John in that role as a scene partner. What is something that you appreciated about him in terms of having him as a scene partner that, maybe helped you tap into something in your own character that you wouldn't have been able to reach without him?
I mean, John is very method, right? So he... on set, sometimes he was not, and I tried to intentionally avoid him a lot because I didn't really want to rehearse with him a ton. I also didn't want to have like much of a relationship with him on set because I felt like I shouldn't. Because sure, you can work with people that you just love and you're having fun all the time in between, but I felt like this was like a trauma, and so he just always gave me something. He always made me. He pushed my levels of comfortability. He made me afraid. I have to tell you, like, when you're in those spaces and like having someone like biting and licking your thigh and saying something, it's not that hard to get to a place. But he was a beautiful actor, and he really pushed me. And I think that my responses pushed him to almost be meaner. And he was a great partner, but he also just like, look at him. I mean. And, he wore his teeth the whole entire shoot.
Oh, wow.
He's just drinking out of a straw with his teeth in. He committed.
That, it feels to me like a creature like that could have been done in like a multitude of different ways. So Spider, I'll give you this really long rambly question right now, but I am curious, like, one, what was it about John and his interpretation of what a creature like that should act like that sparked with you and made you want to cast him? And then also, what was it like figuring out the proper makeup and prosthetics so that you had the look that you wanted on him?
Yeah, I mean, John was, we did a Zoom with him, and I could tell right away that he was incredibly serious about what he does and very thoughtful, and he had a million questions, and just his physicality, just his look. And we did a little Zoom rehearsal, and I could just see his eyes just like glazing over. And I was like, this guy is something going on here that is, and through the whole process, he would, more than anyone he would text me at 3 a.m. asking about a word, why is this the right, and so I was very excited to have somebody that took it very seriously. And especially, because I think, when you're dealing with genre and you're creating a monster, there are some actors that might think it's kind of it could be a throwaway thing, but he certainly wasn't that guy. And then in terms of the design and the not only physically but just dialogue in the character development, it really was important to me to try to find a lane that hopefully we haven't seen much, because I've said this before, in the world of horror, when you think of iconic monster creatures, we think of silent killers, Michael Myers, we think of wisecracking Chucky and Freddy Krueger, or we think of sort of, I guess, more paranormal situation, like the creepy kid in the corner or whatever. But to create a character where the psychological pain equals the physical was really the main goal. So I wanted his words to be as cruel as the bites that he's imposing on her. And so it was really exciting, and I think I feel really great about it. And then, as far as the physical look, the prosthetics, we wanted to keep them to a minimum because it was an acting job, so he wasn't just this beast in the corner. So we wanted to be really thoughtful about not overwhelming him with so much that he couldn't emote. His performance definitely comes through what you settled on in that respect big time. I wanted to follow up on one thing that you just brought up. You said when you did that first Zoom with John, he had so many questions. Is there any particular question that really caught you by surprise and kind of cracked open that character in a way you didn't expect? I'm trying to think if there's anything particular, but he was very like, you know, it was very, very curious. Like a lot of times actors are, this is what I'm saying, and okay, cool. Like, but he was always like, well, why? Why is he doing that? And why wouldn't he interrupt her? Why? And so it was always a pretty lively discussion. And it also kept me on my toes of always justifying, well, why did I write it like that? And finding those answers that I know are inside, but I have to articulate to him. Yeah.
The whys are the best part.
Yeah.
If you're not asking the why are you here? Krsy, I have to ask you about being an editor on this film. I know you've done that for a while, but I mean, in all honesty, I don't think I've ever spoken to an actor who also edits their own films, and I find that absolutely fascinating. What do you think it is for you personally that pairs well in terms of being an actor and also editing your work?
Well, I think a big part of the films we make is because we do so many different jobs, right? And I feel like the editing is another creative part of the job. And since he wrote and directed this one, he got to really do more. I guess I got to be creative on screen, but it's a different thing behind the scenes. So, you know, I did all the production stuff, but that's sort of my moment to be like, okay, I get to be part of the visual and what people are experiencing. It's very strange to edit yourself and stare at yourself all day. You get very sick of yourself. But this particular film, it was helpful because it's so different than my real personality. I look so different. I speak so differently. So I felt like it helped remove me. I always am like, oh, she's doing this, she's doing that. I'm like, no, yeah, you know, it's a strange thing. But yeah, it's in our experience when we get into the edit, sometimes the movie goes in a different direction than we expected, and that's always super exciting to me. And this particular film, Spider went on tour with his band right after we finished shooting. So I got to get a first cut together on my own and just sort of like live with it and throw him what I'm seeing. And luckily, you know, because we do so much prep, nothing's a huge surprise for him. We're very in sync in that way. But also sometimes you know, take an extra couple frames from the scene than we expected to, or I'm like, I felt like this needed more space, or this needed to be condensed, or maybe not that line. And it really felt organic and easy to edit this film, where I've had other ones where I'm like, I don't know. What do you think? Do I need to take this out? I think this, and you know, and we've gone back and forth more, but I felt like this one was pretty much like.
Yeah, the edit for this, I feel like, came together pretty easily because we'd had so many discussions about the pacing of the film, these pauses between dialogue, and you know, it was also in performance. It was right there, so we didn't have to play around with it too much. And I think that's. You run into problems in the editing room when you don't really have a clear idea of what your film is, and so,
or if you shoot too much, like sometimes, like,
and
you
we
know,
do not shoot too much.
We do not know. I mean, and you know which takes he like was responding to, but actually, when I was watching the footage, there was moments where I'm like, even in my performance, I'm like, I don't like that take. I want to do it again. And then I watched it later. I'm like, oh, actually, yeah, I'm actually going to go with this. It surprises me, and I think that also. I do sound design as I edit scenes, and I at least at minimum put in temp music. And I think that making the choices early on with this film really helped move it, because there's a lot of silence and it's important. But then the moments when there are sound design or, you know, a score of some kind, it really means something. And so that was exciting. And then when our composer, Roy Mayorga, I always have a hard time saying his whole name, came in and, you know, really dove into the score, it was super exciting, because we had already sort of like, we know this moment needs something, or it needs to go further, and we got to have those conversations because we already sort of temped it in, and it was great.
What a cool set of skills to have. I often ask folks, no matter what line of work they're in, if you could learn about one particular job on a film set or in post, what would you pick? And it delights me when people say editing. I don't necessarily think everybody out there should also become an editor, but having an understanding of what it takes to cut what you make on set together into a final film, I feel like everyone would have, I don't know, like a better understanding of how to execute their own work if they knew what it took to bring it to fruition in the edit booth.
I agree, actually. You know, I think that even if you don't end up ultimately editing your film, like having an understanding and messing around with it and learning it is really helpful. I know other filmmakers, Francis Galuppi, who did Last Stop in Yuma County, he edits his stuff, and I know it's super important to him, and we bond over that. But yeah, I think that it's just a super creative part of the film.
It's certainly most underappreciated
Yeah.
part of. No one thinks. I mean, your movie is saved or destroyed in
Yes.
the edit. It really
So
is.
true.
You know, you could have the greatest performance from an actor, and you chop it up weird. It's ruined. So it really is. I mean, and it is also emotionally the hardest part because
Yes.
when I'm on set. And you frame up that moment and you get a great performance, you're sitting there like nudging we're making the greatest movie ever, you know? And you're so excited. And then it takes a while to massage that and you start editing and you're like, oh my God, this is garbage, you know? And then something works and like, oh my God. And then, but you have to be patient because there are moments in editing where I just want to like, just forget it, just trash it all, you know. But,
or you have to lose something you love because it just doesn't, you don't need it, even though you love it. And that's hard. You know, I think because we both come from a musical background, we always say this, like, I think my musical background helps with my edit because I edit solely based on feel, which is like music and the way you write music. Whereas, you know, maybe someone else would approach it differently, but I feel like if I didn't have a musical background, I maybe wouldn't have the instincts as an editor. So it's sort of you know, like it or not like it, that's sort of where I come from. It's a very organic place.
Yeah.
Like, this feels good. So it is.
Every
know?
scene has a tempo, you know, and it's like, that's how we'll edit and we'll, you know, where we're going to cut. I'll sit there and be like, we'll watch the scene and just almost like you're counting in the band and there, you know, and it's just, it's all feel. It's all feel. Yeah.
Every year at the end of the year, I always make like this gigantic montage of like all the movies that came out in a calendar year. And it's like silly. All I'm doing is cutting clips that I love to like the beat of particular songs from certain films. And like the satisfaction when you make a cut on the perfect point of a song.
Oh, it's the best.
It's like, it is a little indescribable, but I feel it.
And sometimes magic things happen that you didn't plan on, you know, like one of my favorite cuts in Little Bites is there's a scene where Mindy, he rings the bell and she sits at the edge of her bed and it's a wide and there's a railing and then we cut to this supermarket scene and the railing lines up exactly with the produce aisle. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm a genius. But I didn't plan it at all. Like it was completely.
You just told your secrets.
But those are like such great, like the universe is helping you create little moments and maybe no one will ever notice. But to me, I'm like,
oh no, now I will notice and I will fully understand why that brings you such great satisfaction. We've been ending all of our Fantastic Fest interviews with this particular question because it came up during the first interview that I did. A little backstory for why I'm asking it. The first interview we did was for Rule of Jenny Penn, which of course stars Jeffrey Rush, John Lithgow, and their director was saying that it was incredible watching these two acting titans have, you know, such joy when tackling their work. So now I'm asking everyone, what is the single moment where you felt the most joy while making Little Bites?
Oh,
wow.
You want to go first or?
The single I think it was the day that we wrapped and I knew
when it was over.
No, it was over. No, the moment when I knew, like, I could tell it was actually the scene at the bus stop with Chaz and I. And I could tell with that take, I'm like, this is it. I know we have this take and he's going to say this is a wrap. And it was like, I wanted to like cry and laugh and we're all jumping around. We put on a ridiculous song and it was just like the first, because I couldn't really let myself be light and happy, but I'm like, I knew we did something really special and it just felt so, and we all were out there together in the middle of the night, you know, and that was really, I think, the most joyous. And when it was cut and we could watch it and we're like, we fucking made a movie, man. This is crazy.
I think for me, I'm not just saying this because you're sitting here, but it was honestly watching you because I think that I know how long you've been acting and it's a very difficult life and you know, and for a while you stopped doing it, you know, and we live together, we're a child together. So I know how talented you are, but sometimes I'm surprised. I'm like, I know you're good, and then we did this movie. I'm like, oh shit, you're really good, you know? So just seeing that happen and being a part of it and knowing that whatever happens, you have this, you know, you have this to show everybody, fuck yeah, you see, I can, you know, so to me overall, like I'm tearing up, but for me overall, that was like,
that's right there,
my most
sweet. Thank you.
Most satisfying moment. Yeah. For me.
That's so nice. I mean, I have to just, when the moments that it's funny, like you always want to please your director, right? When you're acting and you want them to be happy, but making him happy or making him excited is the best feeling in the world. So that makes me so happy that you said that.
I've had to learn to express as a director, like a lot of, times you're working so hard, you don't have time to like tell your actors like what a great job they're doing. So like you're like, I have to learn to do that, encourage them on set.
You're so sweet.
Well, it was a beautiful answer, and you're spot on in that respect. Seriously, it is not easy to be the anchor of a movie, exploring such subject matter while still be entertaining, and while also making this pace feel like engaging and like thrilling and have a build, and you keep it all together.
Thank you so much.
I guess on screen and also in the edit booth. So job very well done in every single respect on this production.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing your experience making Little Bites with us. And again,
Thanks
congrats.
so much.
Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
To everybody out there, keep an eye out for Little Bites and also so much more from Fantastic Fest 2024.